It was the way she looked at me that sent shivers down my spine. Her eyes were dark, almost lifeless, like they had seen too much. I didn't know it then, but that look would haunt me forever. It happened one evening when I was walking home from work. I always passed by this street vendor who sold akara, fried bean cakes, by the corner near the old market. I had seen her there before, always alone, frying the akara in a big pot over a fire. The smell of hot oil and spices filled the air, and the sound of sizzling beans was loud and inviting. Everyone loved her akara, and she was popular. But I didn't trust her. Something about the way she smiled, too wide, too sharp, always bothered me. On that day, I was tired and hungry. The sun had already set, and the street lights were starting to flicker on. My stomach growled, so I decided to buy some akara. I walked up to her store, and she looked up with that unsettling grin. "Akara for you, my friend," she asked, her voice low and smooth. It felt too smooth, like honey dripping from a dead bee's hive. I nodded and handed her the money. She didn't say anything, just turned and grabbed the fried bean cakes, packing them into a small paper bag. As she handed them over, I noticed something strange. Her hands were shaking, just slightly, but enough for me to see it. I thought it was odd, but I didn't think much of it. As I took the akara, I noticed the people around me. They looked strange. Their faces were blank, like they weren't really there. I tried to shake off the feeling, but it kept gnawing at me. I turned to walk away, but then she spoke again. "You'll be back," she said, her voice suddenly harsh, cutting through the air. I froze. The words didn't make sense, but they felt too real, like she knew something I didn't. That night, after I ate the akara, everything changed. I couldn't sleep. My body felt heavy, like something was sitting on my chest, pressing down. The room was dark, and the silence was suffocating. I heard a noise, a scraping sound, soft at first, then louder. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, and that's when I saw it. A shadow moved across my room, slow and deliberate. I couldn't see what it was, but I could feel its presence. Then I heard the voice again, her voice, but this time it wasn't from outside. It was in my head. "You will never leave," she whispered. I jumped out of bed, scrambling for the light. I flicked a switch, and the room was suddenly bright, but the shadow was gone. My body was drenched in sweat, my heart still racing. But I wasn't alone. Something was with me, watching. The next morning, I felt sick. My stomach was in knots, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. I went back to the street where I had bought the akara, hoping to see the woman and maybe find some answers. When I got there, the store was empty. There was no sign of her. Just the old pot, still blackened from years of use, sitting in the middle of the street. The smell of fried beans still lingered in the air, but it wasn't as inviting as before. It was foul, like something rotten. I never saw her again. But I hear the stories now. People say she was a witch, using her akara to trap souls. They say if you eat her akara, you belong to her. Your soul is hers, forever. I don't know if that's true, but I still feel her watching me sometimes. When I close my eyes, I can see her smile, wide and sharp. And I know that somewhere, out there, she's still waiting. After that day, I tried to go back to my normal life. But it wasn't easy. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. My body felt tired all the time, and no matter how much I slept, I never woke up feeling rested. I could hear whispers in the quiet moments, just soft voices that seemed to come from nowhere. They always said the same thing. You will be back. It was like they were calling me, pulling me back to the street where I bought the akara. I thought I was losing my mind. But then, things started to happen that made me wonder if it was all real. One evening, about a week after I had eaten the akara, I walked down that same street again. I told myself I wouldn't stop by the store. I couldn't. But something strange happened. The closer I got, the more I felt drawn to the place. My feet moved on their own, like I was being guided by some invisible force. When I reached the corner, I stopped in my tracks. The woman was there again, sitting at her stall, just like before. But this time, she wasn't alone. There were more people around her, people who looked like they were waiting for something, just standing there, silent and still. They were staring at me. I felt a chill run through me. My legs shook, but I couldn't move. She looked up at me, and once again, that grin spread across her face. "You're back," she said. Her voice sounded so much colder this time, like it was filled with something dark. I wanted to run, to scream, but my mouth wouldn't work. I was frozen in place. "Come," she said softly, like she was inviting me into something I couldn't escape. "The akara is waiting." It was as if my body was no longer my own. My legs moved toward her, step by step. Each one felt like I was walking deeper into a trap, but I couldn't stop. I reached the stall and looked at the fried bean cake sitting in the pot. They looked like they were sizzling with something more than just heat. There was something about them that felt off. But I was too tired to resist. I reached out and grabbed one, even though every part of me screamed not to. When I bit into the akara, I didn't feel the warmth of fresh food. Instead, it was cold, like I was biting into something old, something dead. The taste was metallic, and it made me gag. But somehow, I couldn't stop eating. I ate it all, every single bite, as if I was being controlled. Then the world around me started to spin. The street lights flickered, and the people around me blurred. The whispers grew louder, filling my head. I could hear them clearly now, all those voices. They were laughing. Laughing at me. "You're ours," they said. "You'll never leave." Suddenly, I felt it, a sharp pain in my chest. It was like something was tearing through me from the inside. I collapsed on the ground, gasping for air, and when I looked up, the woman was standing over me. Her eyes were black, like pits of darkness. "You belong to me now," she said, her voice echoing in my mind. I wanted to scream, but the words wouldn't come. I felt my soul slipping away, being pulled into the darkness. I couldn't fight it. I could feel myself fading, becoming part of the shadow, part of the curse she had placed on me. But then, just as everything went black, I heard a voice. A familiar voice, one that I thought I would never hear again. "Run." It was my mother's voice. The same voice that used to comfort me when I was a child. Somehow, I found the strength to move. I forced my legs to stand, my arms trembling, and I ran. I ran as fast as I could, not looking back. The whispers still followed me, but I didn't stop. I don't know how I made it home that night. I don't know how I escaped. All I know is that I never went near that street again. But every night, when I close my eyes, I see her face. I hear her voice. and I can never shake the feeling that I am still hers, somewhere deep inside. The whispers still haunt me. And every now and then, when I pass by that old market corner, I feel a cold breath on the back of my neck. I know she's watching me, waiting. Even after all these months, I still feel her presence. Sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I hear the whispers. Soft, distant, but always there, calling me back. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. Maybe the fear had planted itself too deep in my mind. But then, strange things started happening. My appetite changed. I no longer craved the foods I used to love. I would wake up in the middle of the night, sweating, with the strong scent of akara filling my room, even though there was none around. One night, I had a terrible dream. I was back on that street, standing in front of a store. She looked at me, smiling, and this time, I could see her eyes glowing red. The people around her weren't moving. They weren't eating. They were just standing there, frozen, their mouths open as if trapped in a silent scream. She reached out to me, holding a fresh piece of akara, and whispered, "You can't escape." I jolted awake, my heart pounding. The dream felt too real. I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just in my head. That somehow, she was still connected to me. Since that night, I've changed. I avoid that street. I don't buy food from random stores anymore. But deep down, I know it's not over. She let me go once, but for how long? I was one of them. Maybe I still am. And the worst part, she's still out there, selling akara, smiling that wicked smile, waiting for the next hungry soul to take a bite. If you ever see her, don't stop. Don't look at her. Don't eat her food. Because once you do, you may never be yourself again. Our moral lesson for this story are: not everything cheap or convenient is safe. Just because something looks normal doesn't mean it is. Be careful where you eat and who you trust. 2. Your instincts are there for a reason. The narrator had a bad feeling from the start but ignored it. If something feels off, don't ignore your gut. 3. Evil doesn't always look like a monster. The akara seller looked like a normal woman, but she was something much worse. Evil can hide in plain sight. 4. Curiosity can be dangerous. Some things are better left alone. If you feel drawn to something unnatural, resist it before it's too late. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this spooky African folktale. If you found it interesting, don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts. Have you ever heard a similar story in your village? Let me know in the comments. I remain your humble African Storytime, bringing you the best and scariest stories from our rich culture. See you in my next video. Stay safe, and remember, some stories are more real. Bye bye.